If you've been following the series I've been doing here, here's where we are so far. I've talked about socialism and why it's constantly misrepresented. Then I talked about capitalism and how modern capitalism rewards market dominance, not hard work. Then I talked about why simply taxing the rich isn't enough if we don't address how wealth is extracted. Lastly, I talked about UBI, not as a handout, but as a way to restore leverage to the people who've lost it. So now let's talk about something that always comes up when people are struggling economically. Immigration. Because whenever wages stagnate, rents rise, and life feels less stable, a very specific narrative shows up. Quote, someone else must be taking what used to be ours. And immigrants are an easy target, not because they caused the problem, but because they're visible. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Immigrants didn't design the economic system we're living in. They didn't dismantle unions. They didn't gut labor protections. They didn't legalize monopolies or financialize housing. But when people feel economically insecure, they don't look up. They look sideways. That's not an accident. That's how misdirection works. When workers lose bargaining power, competition increases between workers, not between companies. And that's when resentment sets in. So immigrants get blamed for things like lower wages, higher rents, job insecurity, and longer wait times at hospital, even though those outcomes are overwhelmingly driven by corporate concentration, weakened labor standards, housing treated as an investment asset, and policy choices made decades ago. Let's be clear about wages for a second. Wages don't fall because there are too many workers. They fall when workers have no leverage. If you can't afford to quit, you can't negotiate. If you can't walk away, you'll accept less. That applies whether you were born here or not. And here's where this ties directly into UBI. When people have a guaranteed income floor, something important happens. They stop competing for survival. That changes everything. UBI doesn't pit workers against immigrants. It removes the conditions that make scapegoating feel necessary. Because when people aren't desperate, they don't panic about newcomers. They don't see other workers as threats. They don't accept exploitation just to stay afloat. Countries with stronger social safety nets consistently see less economic panic during downturns and less political incentive to blame immigrants for structural failures. Not zero tension, but less, because scarcity fuels fear, and fear fuels blame. Immigration becomes the lightning rod not because it's the cause, but because it's the easiest story to tell when the real causes are abstract, powerful, and hard to confront. And that's the thread connecting this entire series. The problem isn't immigrants. The problem isn't people asking for help. The problem isn't that nobody wants to work. The problem is a system that concentrates wealth at the top, removes worker leverage, and then convinces everyone below to fight over what's left. UBI doesn't solve immigration debates, no, but it removes the economic pressure that turns those debates toxic. It shifts the conflict back to where it belongs, not between workers, but between people and the systems that profit from their insecurity. And until we address that, we'll keep having the same arguments, blaming the same groups, while the same structures keep winning. Peace out, and if you're not already following me, you should. It's going to be a ride.